Alright, today we have 5th grade, Chapter 1, Lesson 3. Our objective today is to learn how to model decimals and fractions using base 10 blocks and make sure we can write them based off of that. So, to start, I have a little joke for you real fast. It says, why didn't the two fours want any dinner? Why didn't the two fours want any dinner? Because they already ate! Oh! Alright, so now we gotta get started. Remember, notes in one notebook, work in the other notebook. I have my Hey Hey shirt on today. If you don't know who Hey Hey is, he is the coolest chicken in Moana. Maybe one of the dumbest animals you ever see, but very, very cool. So, let's start with this modeling decimals and fractions. The first thing we have to go over is our place value again. We have to look at place value first. So remember, if I wrote a number like this, what would my place value be for that? So this 5 is in the ones. The 9 is in the tens. The 7 is in the hundreds. What's after the hundreds? Thousands. Good. And then it goes 10,000s, 100,000s, and then our big one is millions. Millions. Alright, but we're going to keep it simple right now. So, 795. Remember, we read hundreds by itself, the tens and the ones as a team. 795. Okay. So those are the parts we went over already, but now we're going to add something new in. We're going to start with this decimal up here, these decimals. So to start with a decimal, we have to put a decimal point. We put a decimal point in there. Now that separates our money. These would be like our dollar bills. They would be our whole numbers. Alright, so there would be our dollar bills or our whole numbers from our change. So we could have a 1 and a 5 here. This keeps going also. But now we need to figure out what does this mean. Well, if we read it in money, it would be $795. And the decimal point always says the same thing, and that is and. Anytime you say and, anything after that would be your change, 15 cents. But it's not always 15 cents. Sometimes it's not in money, sometimes it's just in a whole number. So this would be something called tenths. Tenths. The THS tells you that it's a decimal. The THS tells you it's a decimal. And then after the tenths comes the hundredths. The hundredths. So the hundredths, those two decimal places would be sort of like your change if we were talking about money. We can also call that your cents. Because change or cents is in two decimal places. And that's your tenths and your hundredths. But this does go out further. And we'll work on that as we move forward. So, now you have the basic of your decimals. So now we're going to look at how does this correlate, or how does this relate to base 10 blocks? Now you guys have been using base 10 blocks for a long time. So, our base 10 blocks look like this. This is a giant cube. This is a flat 10 blocks. This is one 10 block. And this is a 1 cube. So, I'm not going to ask you to make this. This is a lot. I might ask you to make this and this and this. Okay? So let's look at a number and let's try to work with it and see what we get. So, let's put a decimal of decimal point 3. And we would read this as, remember our decimal point? The place value after our decimal point is tenths. So we would read it as 3/10. But now it's 3/10, okay. But what if I wanted to put it into a fraction? I want to get it into a fraction. So now we're moving on to that. If I want to get into a fraction, there's a couple ways to do it. One way is you take this, decimal point 3, and then you ask yourself, all right, well, how many decimal places are behind the 0? How many are behind this? 1, right? There's only 1 decimal place. So if there's 1 decimal place, that means our fraction has 1 0 in it. Has 1 0 in it. And then we put a 1 in front of it. So if there's one number, 1 0, put a 1 in front of it. And then this number just goes on top. 3/10. Oh look, 3/10. THS tells you it's a decimal. So you could do it like that. If you know your place value, you could just read it. 3/10. Oh, I can make 3/10. Okay, that's a good way to do it. Alright, so you could do it, those are 2 ways you could do it. And I'll have a little poster for you to look at for when we go over this. Alright, but now I want to get it from the fraction, so I went from a decimal to a fraction, but now I want to get to a fraction to a base 10 block. To a base 10 block. So, this is just a part of a number. This is just a part of a number. Alright, this would be like having 30 cents. This is 3/10. It's 3 out of 10 of something. So, what we're going to do is, we're going to take base 10 blocks and try to represent this in our lesson. 3/10, look for the 10. Oh, here it is, 10. And then we're going to go fill them in, fill them in, fill them in. So this would be 10, 10, 10. That's 3/10 of the whole, which would be, a whole would be like a whole one of these blocks. And I have a little example for you. So, if this was one whole, this is one whole, a whole. And our problem is telling us we have 3/10 of it, 3/10 of it. That means we would fill in 1, 2, 3. And then you're all filled up. We have 3/10 of that. Okay? So, we could do this if we had paper to write on, which you have your workbook you can use when you see the problems. Or we also have this. We could just draw 3/10. 3 of those. Okay? So, let's try a different one. Alright, this one's going to be so if we have this number, and let's figure out how to say it first. So we have our decimal point. Behind our decimal point, remember this is our change. This is tenths. This is hundredths. Make sure they have the THS because you know that they're the decimal. Alright? And then we read it like this. There's nothing here. So there's 9 here. We have 9 hundredths. 9 hundredths. Now we have to be able to write that in a fraction. 9 hundredths. Now remember our skill. We went like this. This is our number. How many decimal places are behind the decimal point? Well, there's 1, 2, 2. Okay, 2. That means there's 2 zeros in the bottom of our fraction, or our denominator. And then we put a 1 in front of it. So 1, 2 numbers, 1, 2 zeros, put a 1 in front of it. So look, 9 hundredths. There's your hundredths. So if you know what place this is in, you could just write it, 9 hundredths. And then what do we put on top? The 9. There we go. Good. So now we have 9 hundredths. So then we take another piece of paper and we're going to do 9 hundredths out of this. Well, if you see, this is 100. This is 100. So we have to fill 9 of those in. So every stick is 1. This is our 10 stick. Alright, so we have to fill 9 hundredths. So we're not going to fill 9 in, because that would be 90. We're only going to fill 9 single cubes. They're single cubes because it only represents 1. 9 out of 100. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 out of 100. Okay? Then you're finished. That's it. That represents that. If you were doing this by yourself and you were like, all right, I want to draw it and make sure it looks good, well, you could just make your rows. And you should have 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I gotta add one more row on. Okay? And then you can leave one box empty and fill the rest of these in. That box would be empty. So that means there's 9 that are filled in, 91 that are not filled in or shaded. Okay? Alright. And then just make sure we can read this. 9 hundredths. 9 hundredths. Okay, if you need to, pause it. I'm going to get my next one set up. Alright. Alright, my next one is going to be $34. Decimal point 34. So write that down. Let's start with what we know. See if you can write in your place value for the 3 and the 4. Alright, if you did that, put this here so we're set up. Okay, so now we put in 3 is the 10ths, 4 is the hundredths. So we would read this as 34 hundredths. So we write 34 hundredths. And if they asked us for word form, we would just write this out like this. 30-4 hundredths. Okay, because that's something we already learned, word form. So we'll still be practicing that. So we could write it out 34 hundredths word form, and now we have to actually convert it from the decimal, which it is now, to a fraction. So let's start that part. So now I go like this. We're going to change it. All right. Count how many places are behind the decimal. 1, 2. That means there are 1, 2 zeros. What do we put in front of that? A 1. What number goes on top? 34. Okay. Now we have 34 hundredths. Oh look. We have a hundredths block right here. Okay. So now we can start. Alright, so now we're going to use this model and move it over here so we can see a little better. And it's out of 100. That's the whole thing. But we need 34. Now come over here. Here's the trick. 3 tens and 4 hundredths. So we need to fill in 3 10 sticks. Alright? So here's how we do it. So 34. This is 10, 20, 30. So that's 10, 20, 30. So now I got 30, but I need 4 more. They're the single ones, the ones that are real tiny. All right, so then you got to be careful here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 34. So this will be 3. I filled in 4 here. I put a decimal point in the front. Because the whole thing equals a whole. A whole looks like 1 decimal point 0 or 1. But we're not at a whole, we're only at decimal point 34 or 34 hundredths. Okay. Alright, let's move on. We gotta keep going. Oh, let me show you this real fast. You're not going to have a paper for every single one of these when you have to model, when we have to represent. If we're online and we're doing this on a screen, you might be able to just shade it in with that paint button or color it in with a pencil on the computer. But if we're in class, this is how we do it. And I just take this number, that would be your 30, and we do this same thing, but instead, we just do a stick. 2, 3. That's 30. And then we do 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 34. That represents 34 if we're drawing it by hand, which you will do sometimes, especially when you're doing your work on paper. You'll just draw that, and that represents this and this and this. These are all the same thing. Okay? Now, if you're more of an artistic person, you may want to just make a little cube, little box, okay? And that's fine. But it should always look one of these ways. Okay. That's out of here. Alright, our next one's going to be decimal point, 0. No, don't do 0. I wrote the wrong thing. 80. There we go. 80. Which we know that number is, if you're thinking 80 in your head, you are right. 80. Okay, here we go. Now I got this. I have our decimal. Let's write in our place value. Tenths. Hundredths. Tenths, hundredths. So now we have tenths and hundredths. Now we have to be able to read it. You read just like we normally read any other number, just forget about the decimal. 80 hundredths. 80 hundredths. So we would write, if we did word form, 80 hundredths. Don't forget the THS at the end. Okay, now let's convert it to a fraction. Okay, now this one can be a little tricky. If you're a little more advanced with your decimals, I'm going to show you the trick at the end. Okay, but how many are here? 1, 2. That means 2 zeros. Now we put a 1 in front. What number do we have here? 80. Okay, good. Alright, now you have your fraction. So you already went from decimal to fraction, which is a big skill for 5th grade. We're going to be using that a lot as the year goes on. Okay, so now we have to get to our model. That's our picture. So it's out of 100. Here's 100. Here's our 100, base 10 block. Okay? So now we have to fill in 80 of them. Now I'm not going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 80. No way. I'm never going to do that. I know that there are 10 in a stick. 10 in a stick. So I'm going to go like this. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And I know that all of the ones under it are filled in. There we go. I don't have to color every single one in. We don't have to do that. But there is another way to do it. Remember how I told you. Let's say I didn't have this piece of paper, which I'm not going to teach every lesson with one of these pieces of paper. That would be crazy to keep printing the paper out and doing it like this. Sometimes we have to do it on paper on our own. So we would just go like this. We'll use the 10 sticks, just like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 80. Those 10 sticks equal one of these. So really what we have is one of these times 8. One of those times 8. So they are the same thing. This is the same as this. This is the same as this. This and this are the same. Okay? So now you have that. Now you have the whole lesson of decimals, fractions, models for that part. Okay? Alright. Now let's go to our next one. Alright, our next one's going to be wait a minute. Sorry. Decimal point 004. Okay, this is going to be one of our last ones on this way. So now we do this. This is our tenths. This is our hundredths. This is our thousandths. Alright, now here's a trick. There are no ones in the decimals. It starts right at tens, hundredths, thousandths. Now look. 1 is a whole, unless you're doing in decimals, unless you have like 100 or something. So this is tens, hundredths, thousandths. Tens, hundreds, thousandths. The base 10 blocks can help you remember place value for your decimals. So now we go like this. This is read as 4 thousandths. 4 thousandths. Okay? Now let's write our fraction. Well, it says thousandths. Thinking that number goes here. But let's do our trick. 1, 2, 3. That means 3 zeros. 1, 2, 3. What goes in the front of it? A 1. Put 4 on top. Oh, 4 out of 1,000? Oh, that's not a good test score, let me tell you that. Alright, 4 out of 1,000. Alright. You would take this block right here, and I'm going to have to draw this one. You don't have to draw, I just want you to watch this part, because you'll have it in your book or on the computer. And then we're only going to fill in 4 single cubes. 4 single cubes. So that's going to look like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those 4 will be filled in. And that's it. That's all they have. That's all you have out of this whole 1,000 block cube. 3, 4. And that's all you would fill in. So that's that part of the lesson. Okay. Now, let's get rid of this. Okay. Now I want to do the opposite part of the lesson, which is 7/10. If you have a number like 7/10, that's a fraction. I know we could easily get to this, because how many is that out of? 10. What will we use? This 10 stick, right? So we would go like this. You can make that, and you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That'll give you 10 blocks. And how many do you fill in? Fill in 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There you go. You went from this to the model. 7/10. Now that's not a bad test score. That's 7 out of 10 right. That's not that bad. You know, you could get a couple more right and get a better grade, but still pretty good, pretty good. But now I want to go back, and I want to go from the fraction to the decimal. Check this out. How many zeros? 1. So let's put a decimal point in. But instead of putting a 0 in here like we did for the fraction, we can't do that. We underline. 1 0, 1 underline. Guess what goes in the underline? Whatever number's here. 7. 7. The place value is tenths. 7/10. 7/10. 7/10. So now when we put together the fraction and that decimal, they work together as a team. That's called a relationship. No, I know you guys are like, relationship, oh my god, boyfriend, girlfriend. No, it's not like that. It's a relationship. That means they go together. In math or in science, there's relationships. There are relationships outside, but we're not getting into that right now. Alright, next one. Alright, I want to do 21 over 100, or you can read it like this, 21 hundredths. So I want to go to my decimal first. I want to get to my decimal first. So I put a decimal point in here. My trick is, count how many zeros are underneath. 1, 2. Oh, that's what I put here. 1, 2. Look at that. It works pretty easily. What number goes on top? 21. Oh, look at this. 21. You're finished. How nice is that? We already did the decimal. Then this is our tenths. This is our hundredths. Tenths, hundredths. So now we're doing pretty good. Now we just need our model. It's out of 100. That means we're going to use our base 10 blocks. And I need 21. So I'm going to get one. Here we go. Got this. Get a piece of tape here. If this was here, this is my hundredths. And I need to fill in 2 tenths. 2 tens. So that means this whole row is a 10. That's 10. If you do another one, that's 20. That's 20, and I need one single. Right there. So I did the whole row, 10. The whole row is 20, 10, 20, and then 1, 21. If you were doing this without this, I would have asked you to do this. A 10 stick, a 10 stick, and then a single cube. That also is 21. Okay? Alright, we got one more of these left, just to show you how this goes together. Let me get rid of that. That's gone. It'll mark there. Okay. Let's try 7 over 100. And I want to go right to the decimal. I'm going to go right to the decimal. So now you should be thinking, okay, I count the numbers. How many zeros are there? 1, 2, 2 zeros. That means I make 2 underlines. 1, 2. And there's a trick here. Uh-oh. Trick. In math, they try to trick you sometimes. You have to take this 7 and you have to put it in the last spot. That's the beginning of the trick. What do you think goes in this spot? What do you think goes in that spot? If you said 0, you are right. You are right. So now look, we have the tenths, we have the hundredths, 1, 2, okay, 2, 1, 2, okay, we're good. Now I read this, 7 hundredths, okay, 7 hundredths. Oh, they match. How nice is that? That is sweet. Let's say I'm drawing it on my own now. Now it gets tricky. Oh, I know I need the hundredths block, but I only need 7 of them. There are no tens. That means there's no 10 stick like this. A lot of times people go, oh, there's 7? And they'll make 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They'll go like that right away and be like, I'm done. Because they put the 7 here. That's a 0. That means there's no 10 sticks. You should have 7 single cubes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It would look like that. And then you're actually done those types of problems. Alright, so check that out for a minute. I gotta turn the page and get that next part started up. Alright, here we go. We're going to try a couple. Four tenths. What I want to do is I want to write it as a decimal, and I also want to write it in word form and make the blocks. So 4 tenths. Let's do the decimal. 1 0. Decimal point, 1 underline. What goes in there? 4. This says 4 tenths. This says 4 tenths. Now I have to make the model. Let's get a 10, because that's where we're at, 4 tenths, right? So we can just take a 10 stick, make 9 lines in the middle, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we're going to fill in 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, oh, 5, 6, I went way past, oh my goodness. 4, that's it, 4. You could also do it like this. Since there's 4 singles filled in, you could just draw like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. As long as you box them out and they're size appropriate, because look at the size appropriation here. It's 1, 10 of them, 100 of them, 1,000 of them. So you have to make sure you're making them the correct size. That's an important thing. Alright, let's leave that like that for a second. Oh, we got to write our word problem, right? Our word form. We read it. 4 tenths. You could also read it from here. 4 tenths. We're going to write 4 tenths. Alright, hang on. We're almost done. Okay, we're almost done. Alright, next one. Let's do 6 over 10. 6 over 10. Alright, let's make an arrow. Let's start our decimal point. How many zeros? 1. That means 1 underline. And then we just put 6 on top. And we label it 6 tenths. And then we go to the right. And then we have 6 tenths. So that means we're using, right here, we're using this 10 In our base 10 blocks, that's that stick. So we can draw this 9 lines, or we could just make 6 singles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you see how I keep mine lined up as 5s. If you made this 10 stick, you can't leave it. You have to fill it in like we did here. So you have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have to fill those in, maybe even a little better than I did here. You got to fill those in so you can see which one we're doing. And then you're done this part. So that's the tenths. Okay, let's do 100ths real fast, and that'll be the end of our lesson for today. All right, we have 32 over 100. Remember, anytime you get stuck, just pause it. Rewind a little bit, catch up. All right, we're going to go over to here. We're going to put a decimal point in. We're going to count. How many zeros do we have? If you're thinking 2 or you said 2, nice. So now we have 2 spots to fill. Remember that trick, always fill the last spot. But there's 2 numbers here, so it won't matter. 32. Okay. All right. Now let's take it and let's label this. This is our tenths. This is our hundredths. Alright, so now we have 32 hundredths. 32 hundredths. So that means we're going out of 100. So we have to use this block up here. Well, let's say I don't have that paper. What do? I don't know. Well, here's your tens. So you make 3 tens like this. Right? You can even give them a little dimension like this if you want. Sometimes I just use sticks like this. I just do it like this usually, because that means that's a whole 10 stick. But if you want a little more dimension and show them, that's fine. And then 2 hundredths. That'll be your 2 singles by themselves. 1, 2. 1, oh, I need another stick here. So you could do it either one of these ways. You don't have to do it both. Just do one way or the other. This is or, right? These are separate ways, but they mean the same exact thing. See? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2 here and 2 here. 32, 32. All right, last part. We have to write it in word form. Word form. Now you just read it. You can. I think this is the easiest to read. 32 hundredths. 32 hundredths. So you write 30-2 hundredths. Alright. And then this is our last one. This is going to be that trick one. We don't need that 0 there. Alright, I'm going to do it real quick so we can stay with us. Here we go. Alright, decimal. Count how many zeros. 1, 2. 2 underlines. Oh, don't forget the trick. Don't forget the trick. Here's the trick. The 9 has to go in the last spot. The last spot. What goes in that open spot? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Come on, say it. 0. Then we go over and we draw it. It's in the hundredths. Are there any tenths? Nope. 9. That means 9 singles. So we can just go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 singles. Done. Finished with that. Okay? And then we go on to our word form. Look at your fraction. It's the easiest way to read it. 9 hundredths. Alright? 9 hundredths. Alright. that's it, guys. I'll log back on. I will make sure everybody has this set up nice and neat. Make sure you go back, have your notes ready, and this is my outro. I'll see you